a lot of people know who these people are, but let's read here. Pedro Alonso Nino, a lot of people know about him. A navigator and explorer of African ancestry. Pedro Alonso Nino traveled with Christopher Columbus' first expedition to the New World in 1492. He was also known as El Negro, the Black. Pedro Nino was the pilot for Columbus' ship, the Santa Maria, in 1493. He also accompanied Columbus on the explorer's second voyage, which discovered Trinidad and the mouth of the Orinoco River in South America, piloting one of the 17 ships in the fleet. This voyage also brought the first Africans who were actually free men to Hispaniola. Pedro Nino led his own expedition, financed by the Council of Castile, which basically Isabella put together, Ferdinand and Isabella from Spain, the Queen, to find gold and pearls in areas not already discovered by Columbus. Think about what we're saying here. Think about what it's saying. He returned to Spain very wealthy, but did not live up to an agreement he had with the king to turn over 20% of his treasure, known as the royal faith. He was arrested and died in prison before his trial. Another here, the story of Juan Garrido. He was born in Africa. As a young man, he was taken to Seville as a slave. There is no record of his tribal name, but he took the name Juan Garrido, meaning handsome John, while a servant to the Spaniard Pedro Garrido. About 1502, Juan arrived in Santo Domingo as part of an expedition to the New World. He was among the first blacks to land in the Americas. Just bullshit. Blacks already there. He was trained in the military art of the conquistadors. Garrido was counted among the men that went with Ponce de Leon on his search for the Fountain of Youth in Florida in 1513. It's a true story. 1519, he was a member of the expedition led by Hernan Cortez that invaded Mexico, beginning the conquest of the Aztecs. They laid siege to the city of Tenochtitlan and conquered it. The following year, Juan Garrido built a chapel to honor the many Spanish soldiers killed by the Aztecs. But the Aztecs regrouped and retook the city in 1521. The Spanish finally defeated the native population, and Tenochtitlan was renamed Mexico City. So now, it's clear as day to understand these people were Moors. These were Moors who led these expeditions, these black people that was with Columbus and Ponce de Leon. We already know Columbus wrote in his memoir that when he got to America, the natives had already told him about Muslims, what he said was Muslims already being in America, selling back and forth and trading with the so-called Native Americans, how he supposedly saw a mosque over there in South America, so on and so forth. And there's already been proof about the Moors coming over to America. And understanding one, as he said in the video, you had the people from the Mali Empire, which was Islamic, as well as the Songhai Empire, already going back and forth to the Americas before slavery. But as it said in reading, when I was reading about Pedro, that he was basically tasked with going out and finding lands that Columbus didn't already discover, and basically letting them know about it, taking whatever gold and giving the king 20%, and he got killed for not doing so. What does this sound like to you? It sounds like exactly what happened in America to the native people, the people who was already there. If they would go with Columbus and Ponce de Leon to South America and do what they did to these people, completely destroy and wipe them out, didn't care they was black or what have you, if they would do that, of course they would sell out the people that was indigenous to the Americas already. And it's exactly what happened. The Moors came over there, they made deals with these people, and they helped find the land. One, they helped basically infiltrate the people, get cool with them because, skin color, and they would later sell them out. Now, this is one of the things the Moors don't want to answer. They don't want to answer the question of how is it that when you had so many black people being enslaved and tortured around the world, in Africa, South America, what have you, in Europe, that these black Moors were able to basically go on and work with the Europeans. So then, to understand that, one, you got to go back to Spain. As I said in the Moorish DVD, about how once the deal was struck between Rome and the Arabs, and once the Islamic religion was created and spread, just like Christianity and Judaism was, they you had the whole Arab slave trade. It's not a coincidence you have the Arab slave trade right around the time as Islam is beginning to gain steam, and you have the enslavement of all these African people, all across Africa, and then them, being forced and converting into Islam. So you had politically, a lot of these rulers wanted to be down with Islam because that was the only way to basically get to basically deal with the Arabs. They wouldn't deal with you if you was a Muslim. They would attack you. So this is what they did. So you had the Moors, and you had the Moors who had this knowledge, and they was teaching and working with the Europeans to help them gain access to a lot of these African villages that they couldn't get into. So the Moors traded, as I said, and it's one of the questions that they can't answer is, how was they not enslaved like we was? They was basically spared. Well, the only reason why is because they had knowledge, and that's basically what Moor means. It means a learned African. And when you look at Moor, it says here, the origin of the English term Moor is the Greek word maro or maro, which literally means black. I'm going to go down here, forget the rest of that. It says, the term Moor refers primarily to the Muslim inhabitants of the Maghreb, the Iberian Peninsula, Sicily, and Malta during the Middle Ages. The Moors initially were the indigenous Maghrebine Berbers. The name was later also applied to Arabs. Yes, it was later applied to Arabs because before it was only implied to blacks, to black people. So they wanted to cut out the whole fact that the Moors was black, because then you have to go back before the time of Islam, before it was established, and look at all of the unbelievable structures that is attributed to the building of the Moors, the black Moors. So you had the whole thing, as I talked about, the whole black Moors thing, which was the black Moors were, when you pay attention, and a lot of people get this confused. You got to look at the black Moors. They supposedly been the servants of wealthy, rich people in Spain. But what servants do you know dress better than the master? What servants do you know is allowed to wear gold and walk around with gold and jewelry and rings on? What servants do you know is going to have a gold brooch? What servants do you know is going to wear and dress like this and have statues, monuments to them in Spain, in Germany? What slaves do you know have their own flag? It's something that you have to really pay attention to, understand. Why would they have all this stuff if they just servants? So what you have is when you see, and I talk about this in my book, as you see when you get the book, which books are going to be shipped out if you don't know already. But what you have is when you see these statues of the Moors, or them basically being reduced to being, dancing around and begging for money, or being put out on the street as a demonstration, them being beaten or what have you, you had a crossroads. And I talked about this before. You had where the Moors who didn't turn, who didn't want to give up information, who didn't want to basically be with the Arabs or what have you, this is what happened to them. They was put on display, and first of all, they lied about the Moors and how the Moors was basically traitors and destroyed their name for a while. But you also had the monuments that was already going up in Spain due to the fact that the Moors basically bought the Europeans out of the Dark Ages. They had so much information and knowledge that they brought to the Europeans. They were thanked all across Europe for what they brought to the Europeans. So we see these nice statues, and then we see the statues like this, and you got to understand the difference, and what's going on. So again, even when the Queen was being the whole wedding, you had whatever her name was, wear a Moorish brooch. And a lot of people give her criticism saying she's basically, calling her a servant and so on and so forth. Because when you look up Moor or Black Moor, this is what you see. But it's a sign of respect if you really understand her putting the Black Moor on. It's basically saying that you are a savior. That brooch is a very expensive one. Like, why would a black person as a servant have such a high quality piece? For what? Why would they make that for a servant? You got to understand what you watching, what you're paying attention to. And then two, why would she even wear it? It's a sign, symbolism in that. And it's like when you understand esoterically what it's saying, because that's about coming back into melanin, as we'll get into down the line. But she's basically saving the bloodline. She's basically looking out as, when the Moors was looking out, and the good Moors look like that with the turban on, with diamonds and gold and so on and so forth. And you don't let a servant dress better than you and wear gold and diamonds, and it's just not done. So you had the Moors go through this phase. The ones that traded, were the ones that they referred to with the Arabs, the ones we see in Spain, the ones we seen going out and helping Columbus and basically, going into black territories and helping them conquer us and kill us all. They are the ones that traded on us. They are the ones that helped the Europeans get in the position they are at today. They built the White House. They helped them with the Constitution. They helped them with a whole bunch of stuff as they brag about continuously online. You see them being proud of this stuff and being proud of the fact that you had the whole Treaty of Peace and Freedom with Morocco and America, to where if you claim to be a Moor, then you got some kind of, you basically should be free and able to live in America without, any oppression, according to this document. So that's one of the reasons why they want you to, claim who you are and why they ask you your nationality all the time. But when you understand it, they're traitors. They traded on this. We don't want to follow, and you shouldn't want to follow anybody that's following any religion that was created by these Europeans, which they all were. And when you go back and look at everything that we just went over, you see the conquest that took place. The Europeans systematically going through every kingdom, everywhere on the planet where they had set up, African people being in power, being in a position of sophistication. They wanted to destroy all evidence of that and have us, as slaves, and the history and accomplishments basically destroyed. But you got to pay attention to how, when they're noting us, it's always Afro something. They never put us as indigenous as being always there. So it's Afro-American. You have Afro-Puerto Rican or Afro-Latino or Afro-Dominican or Afro-Spaniard, so on and so forth. If they put that whole Afro in front of it all, to basically denote that we're just an afterthought. We haven't been here. We just came on the scene. Even when you studying the history of all this, when you go back down there, they're talking about, when it was just saying, when I was reading, the first African or the first, please, if we've been here, which we know, we've been here before anybody else, how were we the first African? It was Africans before us. And this is how they try to split you up and put you in different groups. Now, you have people who don't want to believe, that we all came from Africa. And this is one of the things you understand. We can't really figure out where it began. What I do know, and what they know, civilization seems to have reemerged in Africa. There's just no way around that. Some of the oldest fossils that have been found there. And, when you do genetic tracing, which they traced it back to the bush people in Africa, which they basically mommy and daddy of everybody on the planet. They have some of the oldest DNA on Earth. And they live primitively, which is why they don't really bother these people. Anybody that's trying to do anything on a scale of sophistication where they could possibly grow as a people economically, then this is who they want to hinder. This is who they want to mess with. And you have, them basically running everybody out of all of the ruins. It's not a coincidence. I mean, as I talked about before, if you've been to India, and you go and look at those ruins, they are some of the most well-preserved ruins that you'll see on the planet. They're amazing, but nobody lives there. They all live out in other different areas and so on and so forth. But you have all of these structures and beautiful ruins that is there in India. And it's like, why is anybody living there? They're all tourist attractions. It's because of the government. It's the same thing in Thailand. It's the same thing in Cambodia. It's the same thing in China. The same thing in Japan. It's the same thing in Africa and in Egypt, anywhere where it's ancient ruins, it's a tourist attraction. You go down to Mexico, same thing. South America, same thing. The same stuff. Anywhere where there are ruins, ancient ruins, we are not living there. They don't want us there. They run all the people out. Why? One is because the energy that's around it, that whole energy field, they want people to come in where they can monitor you and see what you're doing and make sure you ain't sleeping under that stuff and tapping into that energy, which is one of the reasons why Crawley wanted to do so when he came to Africa. He came to Egypt. He wanted to sleep in the Great Pyramid. And he realized then, and he realized before that he can't do nothing. He can't feel nothing. He understood then what he comes to suspect all along, that you need melanin. Plain and simple. Which is why he just started drinking and buying hookers, and towards the end of his life, he just was like, he was done. He was done because all the magic and everything he discovered and all the information and everything that Crawley was about, which we owe Crawley a lot, believe it or not, whatever you want to say about the dude, he was a genius. And those aspects of esoteric knowledge and the occult, he knew so much. But he realized he couldn't do shit because he didn't have melanin. He couldn't get or use the full potential because he didn't have melanin. He understood that his pineal gland was calcified. He didn't have melanin. He couldn't reach those points. And they realized the same thing, that we can, which is why we are being suppressed, because they don't ever want us to get to the point or even understand the knowledge or be anywhere near where we can gain that kind of access, to our energy, as I talked about in Meditation 3. So once they gained control, and got organized, they created all these organizations to basically keep the cover-up going. Egyptology, the Smithsonian, the whole field of science and anthropology and ancient studies and so on and so forth that they control, that's under them. Notice you have all these fields that have to do with government. The government's in some way, shape, or form a part of all of this stuff. It has anything to do, the government got their hands in it, plain and simple. And they pay money, and they pay these researchers money to go around the world and research stuff, to look at stuff. And they're getting paid to basically be on top of everything. And while we running around worried about hip-hop, the hip-hop culture, the rat race, they have the knowledge that we should have. They are in the position that we should be in, and they can't do nothing with it. And that's the crazy part. It's just the way they want it. They can't do nothing with it. And the more and more we figure out how to do something with it and gain the knowledge, we can't get to the point where we can actually use it, because we're so caught up in the whole energy of materialism that has affected us all and it's destroying us all. We're too material minded and not spiritual enough. Like, a lot of people don't even want to accept real spirituality, that it exists, that real energy exists and power exists. They don't want to accept that. So what do you do? What do you do when you are people who can't, tap into actual power? You fake it. That's what they've been doing with Hollywood and magic and all the stuff we see. All the superheroes, white, they got powers. All the amazing stuff we've seen them do on X-Men, all white people. They put the white face on all of this stuff, in fiction, because they can't do this stuff. And we got to watch and be in awe of the fake superheroes that they portray on TV, not realizing that we are the true superpowers on the planet, and we possess the capability of doing some amazing stuff. If we just even take into account the building of the Great Pyramid and everything that the dynasties was able to do after that. As I said before, like, the pyramids was already there, but still, you can't take away from what the dynasties was able to build that we still can't replicate to this day. Karnak Temple, perfect example. Just the building of these colossal statues and what they was able to do, and putting some of the stuff, these obelisks, how they was able to do a lot of these things, even still with the dynasties, is mind-boggling. So we can't just look at the pyramids. We got to look at everything, even after the fact that they were able to come and commit and do. It's amazing. So as I said, when we go into this history, we see what happened to the indigenous people. We see how we was enslaved and basically stripped of everything. They wanted us to pass down the knowledge of slavery and not the knowledge of our ancestors, so we don't ever be able to remember what we were and how we were able to pass down knowledge and information. They want us to pass down the slave gene and pass down the knowledge of slavery, of being tortured and tormented, and looking at the white man as God. Hundreds of years of this torture, and that's exactly what they did. Plain and simple, that's what it was about, to get that whole understanding of who you were and what you were able to do out of our head. A lot of people don't even understand stuff that you can do, talents that you have, the stuff that you always had. Now, the DNA, it's healing itself as knowledge is gained. A lot of people are remembering a lot of stuff and able to do a lot of stuff and have a lot of talents that we see. But for the most part, the reason why this is coming back and coming out is because they understand, as I said before, they need to come back. It's melanin. They need to come back, and they need to basically repair as much as they can while staying in control the black family, which is why, as I said, you're going to see it. You're going to see it slowly change. As he talked about in the video, he said the history books is later going to change because they're going to change it and start putting out the truth, because it's the only way you're going to be able to really heal racism, by doing what they should have did all along. Tell the truth. Plain and simple. So again, it's already started in Sweden. As I told you guys, they tell them in Sweden straight up, you came from Africa, you came from black people. They already know. So they don't look at black people that way. They look at them as totally different. I mean, we made you. You wouldn't be here. You wouldn't exist if it wasn't for us. And that's how they should be looking at it, as you're basically us, the mutation of us. But we are the original. Plain and simple. However it was and whatever means we got here, we was the first before anybody else. And that's definitely something that should be looked at. But they want to still do that by maintaining, keeping us away from real spirituality until they're able to come back into melanin and they already have the understanding of real spirituality. But then if they come back conscious of this information and spirituality, they will be the ones leading the future with that understanding. We will be still lost in not understanding what's going on, but thinking we are following, as I talked about in Meditation 3, thinking we are following, our own people, when really it's a mask. As I gave you the analogy with the Matrix, with Agent Smith, our type of bodies, melanated bodies, that consciousness, that understanding, not so much as white, and ain't got nothing to do with that. This is way deeper than that, as we'll get into down the line, of what these people want to accomplish, whatever they are. It's about energy. It's about moving up in higher forms of consciousness and higher dimensions, and who knows what they want to do when they get to those places. But one of the purposes of this video is to get you to understand, to stop looking at these people as being some kind of, positive people, because when we're talking about Moors, we're not talking about the old Moors. Whenever people was bringing up Moors, they're not talking about the Moors before Conquest. They're talking about these Moors that we see today that traded on us. Plain and simple. So a lot of people that always want to brag Moors. These people traded on us, and they cannot answer the question of why is it that we was enslaved, but y'all was doing deals with white man. What's going on with that? They can't answer that question. They can't talk about that. They can't put it into words. They're gonna tell you something like, well, everybody was dealing in slavery, and slavery was this and that. No. You aided in the destruction of African civilizations all across the planet, along with Columbus and everybody else. To me, just as worse. Plain and simple. You was free. You had knowledge. You should have used that knowledge to help your own people out instead of stabbing us in the back. So when I see people always bragging about these Moors, it's crazy. Now, I always give them credit for bringing Europe out of the Dark Ages, because that would have went bad for a lot of us as well. So that was dope, but they should have definitely left it at that and helped their own people out and gave us true knowledge. Because one, they could talk about science and math and everything like that, but they didn't really understand the whole point of it all and why the Egyptians kept everything the way that it was, because a lot of these dudes wasn't that deep into the mystery school, the ones who came out with that information, that didn't really understand the whole spiritual point of it all and what the ancient Egyptians was trying to accomplish by bringing this all together and having that memory of being able to do what we used to do, because that's what the Egyptians was about. So you got to go back and look at it. You got to think about, after slavery's over, all them years of slavery, they wasn't just going to let us walk free without control. And you had a lot of people who was misguided, and a lot of people who didn't have a lot of understanding, or who was angry and upset about what happened. Just think about after slavery. Walking out free. Now you got to figure out how to survive on your own. They was following this religion and having this faith. But of course, you had a lot of Africans who, once they started learning, just didn't believe in the book. So they took advantage of this with Islam. It wasn't too far removed that the Moors were basically, defeated, and, they were upset and angry. And you had the Jews still trying to come in America and, establish their full grip on everything. And at the time, they were still putting on the big fraud that, the Jews is separate from white folks when they're the same at the top. Well, you understand, So you had, was 1886, January 8th, 1886, Noble Drew Ali was born. Right around the age of 16, he's supposed to have traveled with some gypsies, abroad to Egypt. Now, there's no pictures of Noble Drew Ali in Egypt. There's no pictures of him in Mecca and these other places he's supposed to have traveled. So just keep that in mind. But while in Egypt, he's supposed to have, ran into some Egyptian, mystics, and they basically told him he was a prophet, reincarnation of Muhammad or Jesus, and so on and so forth, and basically gave him a secret doctrine, or the missing doctrine from the Quran that they call it, which is basically the Aquarian Gospels of Jesus Christ. And in the Aquarian Gospels of Jesus Christ, which we'll get into eventually, is basically talking about, the missing years of Jesus. I believe it was like 13 or 8 or 13 missing years or what have you of Jesus Christ's life, which is, a bunch of crap. It's supposed to have been in Egypt during this time and studied in Morocco and other different places. So this doctrine attached to altered version of the Quran, you might as well say, is basically made up their doctrine. So it was like his doctrine that mixed with some of the Rosicrucians teachings, which is part of Masonry. And when you pay attention to Noble Drew Ali, it's clear as day. Dude was a Mason. When you look at the poses and everything, it's Mason, clear as day. So my best look at it would be he was a Mason who they tasked to do exactly what he did. And I don't know what happened at the end, but he died of mysterious circumstances. When he came back to America with this knowledge, he basically went to New Jersey. Supposedly had set up the Canaanite temple in New Jersey back in 1913, and you had Arab by the name of Abdul Wale Farad Muhammad basically come and set up his version of Islam during the same time. And while you had the Canaanite temple going on with Noble Drew Ali teaching these people about their supposed Asiatic heritage and where they're from and so on and so forth, mind you, he's still pushing Jesus Christ as being Savior and all that kind of stuff, prophet, what have you. But Farad Muhammad comes and start teaching a different version of Islam and start teaching these people Arabic. They left the Canaanite temple and start working with him more. So Noble Drew Ali left New Jersey and ended up going to Chicago and set up the Moorish Science Temple there. Now, you had people that was making a lot of money off of what they was doing that was like a part of his group. And you had one of the people branch off and he was murdered, and they arrested him for the murder, but he was never charged. I know he died like a little while after he got out of prison, from mysterious causes. But one of his followers that was supposedly in the Moorish Science Temple is a man named W.D. Ford. And W.D. Ford was supposedly the reincarnation of Farad Muhammad. And he basically is the one who created and started the Nation of Islam. I'm giving you a whole paraphrasing all this stuff and just getting through it real quick. But that's basically in a nutshell. And you have out of the whole movement with Noble Drew Ali coming this Farad Muhammad and coming this Nation of Islam, which again is completely different from traditional Islam, as well as what Noble Drew Ali was teaching these people that they were Moors, that the whole thing we see today about nationality and claiming your sovereignty, this stems from 1986 when you had the Moroccan ambassador basically come out and recognize the Moorish Science Temple as being, people from Morocco. So that's where they started this whole nationality thing. And as a matter of fact, it's a couple Moorish groups that if you join them, they basically make you a citizen of Morocco. So you can claim the benefits of the Treaty of Peace and Freedom and be protected under that. So to them, it's all about nationality and sovereignty. Now, Elijah Muhammad is a product of W.D. Ford, who is Farad Muhammad. And we know about, as I said, establishing the Nation of Islam. And W.D. Ford was supposedly a member of the Nazi Party. And I showed you guys before about the pictures where you have the Nazis at a NOI meeting. So it's a lot to make of this connection, which I have already made, and showing you guys that the Jews run that whole situation where they was controlling. To me, they put Noble Drew Ali where he was at, or they took over what he was trying to do later on. But clearly they were behind Farad Muhammad and behind Elijah Muhammad, and is behind Farrakhan to this day. But again, a lot of people want to jump on these bandwagons of, see a lot of people, even people that follow me, Fez is on, you should not be a Mason or a Shriner or a Moor if you're black. Just that simple. Especially understanding the true history of what these people have done to us, and they are not for, but are being controlled by these, not for us, but they're being controlled by these Jews. And it's clear to see. It's all part of Islam again. So claiming to be conscious, but being a part of any of these groups is still following the religion when you understand. And Islam, as we go back and look and see clearly, was created, as I've shown you guys, by the Romans, and it's right there with Catholicism. Now, I'm mentioning all this so you can see that, going through the history, you can see the role that Islam played and the Moors played in the enslavement of African people. We've seen the adoption of the fez from Noble Drew Ali, as he says. Black men should wear fez or turban, in that we're talking about a person who's came to America, right? Not came to America, he was born in America. Supposedly, as a matter of fact, supposed to be a Cherokee. His dad's supposed to be, or mom supposed to be Cherokee Indian. And his dad's supposed to be from Morocco. We're still talking about people who's pushing an Arab religion onto African people and trying to say that it was always African when there's absolutely no proof. Before Islam even was talked about or even existed, Moors, the real Moors, the ones who didn't trade, was already building. We was already building. So the so-called Moorish science, information and knowledge we had before Islam. We had before Christianity, before Judaism. We already had this stuff. So why is it people are taking it in a different form where it has been completely corrupted and being used against you? There's a lot of people that defend Farrakhan, but what did Farrakhan do for us? All this time running, gone, what did he do? He gave us a march. A couple people he helped here and there, but what did he do to help overall black people as far as any type of progression as a people? Nothing. Because he's working for them, and that's his job. The reason why he's been around so long, because he has been effectively doing his job and keeping you exactly where you at. Plain and simple. And that's his job. That's all their job. They were created to infiltrate black society because we was moving up. We was making our own moves. And they wanted to make sure they can control that. That's what you do. This is what these societies people operate. Plain and simple. They create their own competition to keep competition away. I mean, just think about that kind of a mindset. It's brilliant business wise. So if you have a company that's doing well, that's selling a particular product well, instead of waiting for somebody to come and try to compete with you, you create your own competitors and you own them under different names. So it seems like to everybody on the outside that, it's competition. It's the same company. As I showed you guys before, you have 11 companies that basically create and sell every product that we buy in America. 11 companies, that's it. So this is the same way these people think on different levels of control, so they want to make sure they have and are in the best positions to control. They wasn't just going to let us walk out free without some control. It's more obvious with some people than others that they were a part or being controlled by, Jews, especially when you look at the whole thing with the NAACP being set up by Jewish men. When you look at the way that Marcus Garvey was attacked by W.B. Du Bois and others, it's clear who they're working for. It was nothing that the man was doing that was wrong. He was trying to do something to really help us. And anybody that has tried to do so has been killed or other. They have been silenced. So you go back and look, you had the Moorish Science Temple and people claiming Moorish nationality at the same time being Jews. A lot of people jumping in and out of different religions and so on and so forth, trying to fit in somewhere and never once going back to where they came from and looking at the reason why everything happened the way that it did. You don't need to jump into anybody's religion. Stick with what you are. You are truth. It's nothing to hide from. It's nothing to be ashamed of or to worry about when you have truth on your side. Everything that they are doing, they stole from you. So you need to go back and look to where and why they stole it. So the reason why we, as conscious people, the true conscious people, why we go back to Kemet only, is because that's where everything came from. Everything else is a bootleg, watered down version meant to deceive you and keep you from the real truth that's back in Kemet. Plain and simple. That's what's there, the truth. Now, they gave you a bunch of Easter eggs and stuff that you can really feed off. That's truth. But, hidden very well. Plain and simple. Given to you in parables and allegories, such as the Bible and these religious books. And it's up to you to be able to decipher that. But when you do, it's going back to Kemet. It's just that simple. So all these people who bring this information, trying to trace it back to Kemet and trying to feed off Kemet in some way, you just need to go straight to Kemet and deal with what was taught there and what that information is about, which is what I talk about. But the history of it all is just what's not being told. You have, as we've seen, this conquest. Europeans. It's nothing that any European can say. When they're talking about this crap, about how we sold ourselves into slavery and so on and so forth, look at the conquest these people, what they did. They went out and committed genocide across this planet. They conquered and colonized, and then they want to sit here and act like we tripping when we trying to, figure out or talk about our history and what happened to us. Like it's a joke. The history is right there. So all you got to do, if you know your history and people talking this crap, you can pull it out anyway. Well, okay, so what about the genocide here and the genocide there? What about what happened to the people, the Congolese people? What about what happened to the Tasmanian people and all these indigenous people that was conquered, had their lands taken? Like, how do you justify that? And today we see resorts, we see tourist attractions where ancient monuments once stood. And, it's fun for them. And we don't even really get to visit because we're too poor to even afford to go to a lot of these places. But it's like they made it so they can go ahead and bask and, enjoy the spoils of war and the spoils of their conquering. So white people go all over the planet freely, happily, and get to chill and relax on lands that used to belong to us, while we can't afford to go there and go visit any of this shit. It's black people talk about Kemet all day, never been there. Talking about all these places all day, never been there. So you have a dude who supposedly the reincarnation of Buddha, Jesus, and Muhammad, what have you, come in and teach a bunch of black people a bunch of stuff. Dylan, who takes Ali, which is clearly Arab, and brings a bunch of information pertaining to Arabs in the Islamic world and try to tell black folks that that's black. That's theirs and it came from them. Understanding that one, it's old, it's ancient, and they pressing on the fact that you have Islam being as old as it is. They believe that it being so old that it's somehow valid. It's the same mistake that the Hebrews is making, because they can trace the Hebrews back so far. They think because that's so old that it's valid, when we got to understand that the conquering, the genocide, the death of our people began back in ancient Kemet, and we got to start from that point. So before that point, during that point, where do we see all this stuff? Where do we see the stuff that the Moorish is talking about, that the Muslims was talking about? Where do we see that before and during the time of ancient Kemet, or before the time of the European conquest? You don't. You see what the Africans was teaching, the stuff that we had before any Arab or any European had, which is back in Africa and dealing with the Egyptians and the Africans in North Africa. Nothing that these people talking about with this Muslim Moorish bullshit. Plain and simple. So the people who had this knowledge was coming into Kemet, was a part of Kemet, and was teaching this stuff. Plain and simple. But as I said, the Moors did not trade. All of them. You had some that traded and went with the Muslims, and the whole deception that the Romans put out with this whole Islamic thing, which is what everybody's following. And they don't really understand that that's where it comes from. It's clear as day to see that. So you got to understand, one, our history is everything. And I always tell people to go back and look at the history to understand real things, what's really going on. When you start tracing the stuff back through history, you can see how stuff fall apart. One, the fact that these people give themselves credit for creating so much stuff. You trace it back, you can see that that's not possible. All these people who are supposed to be indigenous to certain lands, you trace it back, we can see that's not possible. The fact that they want to claim America and give it to these Native Americans because they don't want to give it to Africans, when you trace it back, you can see the truth and all that. Plain and simple. Truth is out there if you want to see it. You just got to go through the history and look at it, which is why this is an important series for people to understand, because it's a lot of missing pieces that you can put together going through this series and make understand once you understand this kind of knowledge. So for my people of Latin America, Latino speaking people that follow me and everything, you can see clearly, it's not a knock on you guys where you came from or how you was established, because everybody is off kilter that's in America and that's in, South America due to slave trade. I mean, everybody is not really where they're supposed to be in the position they're supposed to be, except for the white man. Because they put themselves there. That's exactly where they want to be, and they're moving up to their final point. But everybody else is not stable and not where they want to be, and that's including the Asians. Because now, whatever deal they took dealing with the Europeans, they kind of stuck with. But, as you can see, and from what I can see, they are starting to realize exactly what they was told thousands of years ago. They got to come back into melanin, which is why you're going to see everything changing, and it's going to be pro-black and united from here on out, and smoke and mirrors, and it's exactly what it is. And the truth, it can't be hidden, one, but they're going to have to be able to explain why so many things goes against what we have been taught in school. All the stuff that's not in the history books that's been written, not only by Africans, but by Europeans as well. and they can't. So eventually they're going to have to get with the program, and that's what they are good at, which is what they're doing now, infiltrating this whole thing with the conscious movement. So got to be careful. You got to know history in order to understand a lot of this stuff. But, you know, I want to thank you guys for taking the time to watch and purchase and support. And the next part of the Ancient History series is definitely going to get into a lot more on this, going over into the everything we went through from after slavery on up. There's a lot of information within there that's going to make a lot of sense about where we stand today. But thank you guys for taking the time to watch. See you next video.